What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, December 9th, 2016. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. Thank goodness it's Friday. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, ready to answer the phone when you call on in, and the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 of our program today. So, getting right into it, there was, over in Wisconsin, a federal judge has refused to halt the recount there, saying that the recount isn't going to change anything anyway, so why complicate things? So far, Wisconsin is 82% complete. And Clinton had only gained 61 votes. So it's not going to change anything there. We're still waiting to hear about what's going on up there in Pennsylvania. But over in Michigan, of course, the big stink there, and still not even being mentioned by the corporate national TV news, or hardly anybody else, is they uncovered massive, massive evidence of election fraud, an attempt to rig the recount to the point where half of Detroit was declared invalid for the recount because of all these ballot boxes where the number of ballots in the ballot boxes did not match the paperwork. And all of this election fraud favored Hillary Clinton. And it proves Donald Trump was right when he expressed his concerns about the honesty and accuracy of the election. And remember how the corporate media jumped, how dare you say our elections are, it's impossible to rig the national elections. Except, of course, for Russia, they're doing it all the time. That's what we were getting from the White House. Now, one good piece of news coming on out of Michigan, because of all the massive fraud they've discovered, Michigan's House has just passed a very strict voter ID bill. We're going to start seeing the pushback to all this nonsense about how you have to have a driver's license to drive and you have to show ID to get your social services. But when you vote, no ID is required. You don't have to prove you're a citizen and eligible and everything. There's a big pushback going on that one. Michigan is also examining ways that they could subject Jill Stein to civil forfeiture to help recover some of the costs of this recount, because it's been hugely expensive, money that could have gone to do things, like replace the water system down there in Flint, Michigan. And they're looking for a way to demand that she compensate them for the costs. Now, it looks like this party is still not over, even though the recounts have failed, and there's still a gigantic gap between Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton in the Electoral College. They're still pushing that the electors have every single right to do what's best for the country and vote for Hillary Clinton and put her on in. And some of these various electors in various states are filing lawsuits to basically overturn the laws in their state, saying you have to vote according to the will of the people in your state. Well, I mean, if the electors are just going to be allowed to vote for whoever they've been bribed to vote for, why even hold a popular vote at all? If they're just going to turn around and say, well, we don't care, what you voters actually voted for. It's up to us now. We'll choose the rulers and the leaders. What do you think this is, a democracy? But this still isn't over. We've got to make it to December 20th here. Story out of Global Research, a carefully planned operation to prevent President-elect Donald Trump's accession to the White House. And they're pointing out not only this botched recount effort, the death threats on the electors, and these very liberal PR firms that are out there trying to sell this idea that it's okay for the electors to betray the will of the voters, and pointing out, and you probably already noticed this, an attempt by the corporate media to demonize and discredit Trump before he's even stepped in the Oval Office, and worse, to imply he's a Manchurian candidate, he's really working for the Russians. They're back there pushing that Cold War propaganda. Russia rigged the election. Russia is behind Donald Trump. Russia is behind all of those independent media websites. Those evil, evil, evil commies. Psst, the commies are gone. All right, those evil, evil, evil Russians. And it's not going to get a lot of traction for a very simple reason. The younger generation has grown up without the benefit of a public education system that propagandized them constantly about how evil the communists were. And I remember when I was in public school, in the social studies and looking in the books and all these cartoons about just how terrible the Soviet Union was and how you didn't even want to be near them because you'd get cooties or something like that. And it was laid on pretty thick to the point where even at that young age I was saying, yeah, this is just way, way, way over the top. Now Michael Moore has chimed in yet again, and he is predicting Donald Trump will not become president. He's saying 6 weeks is a lot of time. Now, 6 weeks obviously goes past the Electoral College, which meets in just 10 days. So Moore is out there essentially predicting Donald Trump is going to be assassinated. And they're out there pushing this idea that the Electoral College should be given the freedom to just vote for whoever they want to and ignore the voters in their respective states. And Hillary's supporters are still out there saying, well, she won the popular vote. Well, she won the popular vote. Folks, look what they're discovering up in Michigan. We don't actually know how many real, genuine, legal votes Hillary Clinton got. VoteFraud.org and TrueTheVote.org are both estimating a minimum of 3 million non-citizens voted in this election. They weren't supposed to, and they were all voting out of those sanctuary cities in California and every place where voter ID laws had been overturned by DNC lawyers all during the year. We don't really know. Now, Barack Obama has come on out and ordered a full review into allegations Russia hacked the 2016 election and says we're going to even go back all the way to the 2008 election. We know those Russians are out there. Mind you, this is all coming from the same people who told you Saddam had nuclear weapons. And if Obama wants to know about hacking the U.S. election, he should really look a little closer to home. Michigan, to start, would be a good place. And the Department of Homeland Security, Georgia is still furious that somebody from the Department of Homeland Security was trying to hack in to their statewide voter information system for some reason. And they're reiterating the Department of Homeland Security does not have permission from the state of Georgia to be mining or altering data in their statewide election system. So we're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. And then we're going to take a couple of phone calls here. Bob in Las Vegas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. I think I'm going to start writing the Trump campaign, the Trump people, to nominate you to head a blue ribbon commission for electoral reform.
Oh, boy, I would love that job. Well, I'm going to be pushing for electoral reform anyway, and I don't have to be part of Trump's administration to do it. We've got 2 years before the next midterm election to get this mess sorted out, and I've got a good foundation for a plan. I'm not going to promise a cheat-proof election, but I can promise a system that makes cheating very, very hard as opposed to the current one, which is designed to not only facilitate election theft, but to help conceal it as well.
I love your ideas, especially yesterday. You mentioned in our call the point system. That's great. We'll just do away with these electoral college voters and just base it on a point system. For example, whatever the electoral college votes add up to in each state, the way it is today, but do away with the actual voters, the electoral college voters. Have a point system.
Well, I think that again, one of the reasons for the electoral college was so that politically aware people could block a populist demagogue from taking the White House. Remember when the Electoral College was set up?
Yeah.
Okay, we're talking about a time when the majority of Americans were really not very educated. They didn't have any kind of media to be paying attention to what politicians were doing. They were mostly living in rural areas, working on farms, and they were nowhere near as sophisticated and worldly as we are today. So that was the reason for that mechanism to be there, as well as to balance the effect of the election between the general population and the giving equal weight to the states as well. So there's a legitimate reason for that mechanism, but in this case it's being perverted, which is why the Founding Fathers also put in that provision where if Congress concludes the Electoral College has not acted in good faith, they can overrule them. And we may actually see that happen with all of this nonsense.
You know, Mike, I wanted to let you and all your listeners know that on RT today, tomorrow, and Sunday, they're going to be showing on their website John Pilger's new film, The Coming War on China, which will be very interesting regarding the U.S., all the U.S. bases. He says 400 that are now surrounding China, basically like a necklace. So I think people should look out for that. And it's interesting, in an interview he did yesterday, he mentioned FDR's father, John Kerry's grandfather, drug runners of opium from China. So this has been going on, this narcocracy, for so long, going back to the Opium Wars. And also Peter Dale Scott has done some great work regarding Afghanistan and Latin America and, of course, Vietnam before Afghanistan. So this has been going on in this country for, more than a century. Oh,
yeah. I mean, illicit substances are always favored by people as a very compact, portable store of wealth. The Skull and Bones fraternity at Yale University, through which so many of our presidents and CIA have gone through, was actually initially founded on opium money. The official name of the Skull and Bones fraternity is the Russell Trust, and the Russell family fortune was made growing opium here in the United States. It was a legal crop at the time. They would then sell that opium to the British, and the British in turn would sell it to China, which did trigger that war over Britain's right to sell opium to the Chinese people, which ultimately led to the collapse of the imperial government and the rise of communism in China. We had the CIA bringing in heroin from Vietnam inside the body bags of the dead. We certainly know about Iran-Contra, cocaine coming up from Central America. I mean, the biggest drug smuggler in the country is the country, and that's a reality people are finally beginning to wake up to. It is a narcocracy. When you are engaging in illegal activity on that kind of a scale, you can acquire enough money to buy your way to the heights of whatever government you're in. Now, I do have to tip my hat to the people of Colombia, because some years ago they succeeded in actually putting their own president on trial for being a drug lord. Unfortunately, he was acquitted, but at least they had the gonadal tissue to actually try.
Yeah, Pilger had said that drug money basically from the opium trade basically financed the railroads in this country and also helped build Lowell, Massachusetts, which I'd never heard of. I never heard, that these cases, but it's incredible. But pursuant to what we were talking about yesterday about the U.S. being a third world country, I saw an article about civil forfeiture, and it's funny if it wasn't. It would be funny if it wasn't so sad. You have these police chiefs and district attorneys. This one police chief in Michigan spent $75,000 of that forfeited assets for a tanning salon for his wife, and he spent another $40,000 on marijuana, alcohol, and prostitutes. This was an article by Mark Nessman. I mean, this is where it's going to.
I know. It's out of control. I mean, we're hearing about police officers and police chiefs, the higher ups, driving around in very expensive supercars, and we confiscated this from somebody who may have been a drug lord. We're not really sure, but we took the car anyway. And the original idea of civil forfeiture was to provide a legal framework for the government to strip massive amounts of wealth from the really large criminals. And unfortunately, it got perverted into a policing for profit scam by law enforcement across the country. And in many cases, they literally didn't have any choice, because as civil forfeiture became more widespread, city governments said, they can make money off of civil forfeiture. We're going to cut the budget to the civil police and spend the money on something else, like a new artwork for the lawn in front of the state capitol or something. And so it just really declined from there. But it is completely, totally out of control, to the point where right now the uniformed police in the United States of America are stealing more from law-abiding Americans than the muggers and thieves and burglars put together.
Yeah. Last thing, Mike, and I'll let you go. I always appreciate your book recommendations, so please keep them coming.
Okay.
I just want to recommend one. If you had read it before, it's called The Negotiator by Frederick Forsyth, and it really gets into the mind of this chairman of a military contractor who fears that his company's profits will be deeply impacted by this president who's negotiating a disarmament agreement with the then Soviet Union. Mm-hmm. It's kind of interesting. So you can check that out. But
we can look at that definitely. I mean, just to insert a little historical note, when Kennedy and Khrushchev were trying to ratchet down tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union, that was when Francis Gary Powers got shot down, which gave the Russian hardliners the excuse to say, we're going to ramp it back up and we're going to be militant and we're going to do this. And certainly it made the U.S. defense establishment very, very happy. They didn't want peace with Russia. The Cold War was very, very profitable. They could crank out any junk at all, charge huge amounts of money for it, knowing that the weapons were never actually going to be used anyway. So it was just this gigantic scam.
Exactly.
And Kennedy did express at one point in his writings his thought that Francis Gary Powers' aircraft may have been sabotaged because the U-2 flew much higher than the Russian missiles could hit. But the story is that apparently something caused Powers' U-2 to flame out while it was over Russia. And at that altitude, a restart is impossible. You had to glide the U-2 down lower into the atmosphere where the air was thicker, where you could restart the engine and then climb back to altitude. And it was while he was at that lower altitude attempting a restart that he got hit.
I think that was but I think, though, just to correct you, I think that was Eisenhower was in office. I think they basically forced the cancellation of the upcoming summit.
Yeah, you are correct. Yeah, that was I'm sorry, that was Eisenhower.
Mike,
yeah.
Do you believe? I listened to Eustace Mullins a lot regarding the Fed, but I saw a video of his where he said World War II was prolonged, especially in the Pacific theater. The U.S. should have gone right to Japan. Instead, they were island hopping, and it was prolonged for the bankers. Do you agree with that?
I would not be surprised at all. Look at the history of Vietnam. I mean, they were just out there bombing empty fields and grinding up munitions so that they could get more tax money from the American people. I mean, wars are the bankers' richest harvest of debt, and the longer the war goes on, the more the bankers are going to make. There really wasn't any purpose to that island hopping, especially in hindsight when you consider that the war was finished off, with that with the atomic bombs. And it was also, of course, about establishing those islands as U.S. territories to bring them under U.S. control, and many of them still are.
They were also doing it in Italy too, like going to Sicily and then Italy. Why not just go, right to the source, Berlin, for that matter. So, if it's so they were doing it in both the European and the Pacific theater, according to Mullins.
Well, remember Desert Storm when they went in from Kuwait and they were in there spending all that money and grinding up all the munitions. Somebody said, "Why don't you go to Baghdad? Why don't you go to Baghdad?" No, we'll stop here. So that a few years later they get to fight that war all over again and spend more money and put the American people deeper into debt to those private central banks. And again, I've got this article, All Wars Are Bankers' Wars, that really kind of lays out what that link is all about.
I'm afraid about this cashless society and the bankers. The bankers want more control. This is their wet dream. I think if Trump fails to get these manufacturing jobs back, these middle class jobs, then most people aren't going to have much money in the bank anyway, and they're not going to care what happens to the accounts of those that do have money in the banks. So I think it looks pretty. They're basically using India now as a test case, like they used Cyprus on the bail-in. I'm worried. I think with most people, especially these young kids, they're going to have the attitude, who cares? Take control.
Well, it's because
they have enough money anyway.
It's what they're used to growing up. They're not old enough to remember that there was a different way of doing things long ago that actually did work better. And the problem with that whole cashless society is it's being done to lock the wealth into the banks so that in the event of a bank failure, people can't go and get their money back out. There's no way to get the money into your own hand, so the bankers can keep it, and and when it goes, It's going to leave the entire population absolutely penniless. But the people behind these plans don't really care. They're just all about looking after their own wealth in the short term, and they don't understand.
They're a bunch of pigs.
They're on their way to a global implosion of this whole private central banking system. Bob, got to let you go here. Got to take a break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hello, hi, America. Welcome back to the show here, and I just got an email from a viewer on BAM User. Yes, I'm wearing my Hillary for Prison T-shirt, and the prison falls off the bottom of the screen. No, I have not become a Hillary supporter. If you know anything about me, you know that I have been a Hillary opposer for 22 years now, and with darned good reason. I'm not likely to change anytime soon. Let's go back to the phones. Richard in Mississippi, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. You know about that recount? If Hillary Clinton keeps this up, she's going to destroy the legitimacy of the whole entire U.S. government.
Well, yeah, she is. I mean, and a lot of people on both sides of the aisle are already saying that the public image of the United States is just being, destroyed by all of this nonsense. And it's certainly undermining confidence in the election system in the minds of the American people, which is why I think, this is the opportunity to stand up and demand an open, verifiable, honest election system. And it is possible to do. But our current election system is intentionally designed to facilitate and conceal election fraud because that's what keeps the establishment in power.
There's one thing I want to add, Mike. I think Donald Trump will have 2 to 4 years to help clean this election system up, and he needs all the help he can get. He can't do it all by himself to ensure an honest election system.
Well, no, he can't. Donald Trump can't do anything all by himself, and that's why I keep telling everybody, getting Trump into the White House on January 20th is not the end of our effort. It's the beginning. Our job is actually going to become much harder because he's facing an obstructionist Congress. He's facing an adversarial media, and we're seeing our entire federal government behave like spoiled children and just throwing tantrums, and everything that they're doing is all about saving face and their ego and getting back and revenge and gotchas, and there's virtually nothing left over for them to actually think about what's good for the country. So we, the American people, are going to have to stand shoulder to shoulder with President Trump and basically back him up with whatever changes he needs to make. We're going to have to stand there and glare at those senators and representatives and say, you represent us, you work for us, we the people are your boss, and if you forget that, we're going to do to you next election what we did to Hillary this election. Okay? And all of this caterwauling about how it should be illegal to criticize the government, that's ridiculous. The government are our employees. We the people are the boss. Read that Constitution. And like any boss anywhere, we not only have a right to criticize poor job performance by our employees, we have a right, when necessary, to fire them. And we need to all remember that. The government is not our master. It's not our ruler. It's our employee. They're supposed to remember they're public servants, servants of the public, not public masters.
I think that's all, Mike.
All right. All right, thanks an awful lot here, and we're going to let you go. I'm trying to get some updates on what else is going on with all this recount stuff. Funny little story coming out of the Daily Caller. Apparently, PR firms that worked with Hillary Clinton are now canceling all their Christmas parties. They're just so depressed. They're so traumatized. They're so upset. Oh, we can't get into the Christmas spirit with Donald Trump going to the White House, How grinchy can you get? Little factoid you might want to remember, Donald Trump won this election spending less than half the money that Hillary Clinton did. He paid $66 million out of his own pocket. Hillary had twice as much money plus the election fraud, and she still lost. Now, out in California, a student succeeded in getting a video of a professor literally describing the election of Donald Trump as an act of terrorism, and repeating that nonsense about how Trump is a white supremacist and Trump is evil and Trump smells bad and he dresses funny and his hair is fake, and all these other talking points, all of which have been completely discredited. Donald Trump was in public life for 30 years before he ran it against Hillary Clinton. Nobody called him a racist. Nobody called him a woman hater. It was all made up by Hillary Clinton and supported by the real media. Registered trademark. All right, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show, and I want to step on back with some updates on this whole recount nonsense. Out in Nevada, which is a state that Hillary won, their partial recount resulted in just 15 votes being changed. way too short to force a statewide recount, so that's now over and done with. Over in Pennsylvania, the judge who's hearing that case has now said he will have a decision on Monday. Everybody was expecting the decision today. It's now being put off until Monday. And as for that lawsuit down in Florida, there's no update on that. But at this point, it is becoming very obvious that this attempt to paralyze these three states and keep them out of the Electoral College has failed miserably. And so now the big push is going to be on to hijack the Electoral College, a move that will be so overt and obvious, it's going to outrage the American people. And again, Hillary Clinton seems perfectly comfortable with the fact that she could ignite a civil war in this country with this nonsense. But no sacrifice is too great to anoint Empress Hillary the First. Yes, there'll be blood, but that's a sacrifice I am willing to make. All right, let's go back to the phones. Dustin in New Jersey, aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, what's the chances of that judge having a pillow sitting on his porch in the morning?
Having what sitting on his porch? A horse's head?
No, a pillow.
Yeah. Yeah, could be, but again, they've already over in Pennsylvania. They're starting to find the same kind of attempts to rig the recount that they found all over Michigan, and at this point, I would almost think that the corporate media and the government would shut this Jill Stein nonsense down. Because it is running the risk of destroying the credibility of our election system in the eyes of the American people. And remember, that illusion that somehow we are still in control of this nation is what convinces most Americans to sit quietly as the abuse continues to pile on. With civil forfeiture, forced vaccinations, this is what you voted for. You voted for all this in the last election, so just sit down and send in your tax money and give us your children for wars. And remember, this is what you wanted because that's what the voting machine said. And if they destroy that illusion...
They don't care about the country, Mike. They're globalists. They don't want borders, so they don't care. Look at the wars they caused and the death. They don't care. Yeah, but
the New World Order needs the U.S. military as its enforcer, as its button men. If the U.S. descends into a civil war, it's going to balkanize the United States, not make it part of some grand global government experiment. I mean, the globalists have botched this so badly. Europe is coming apart. The United States, if Hillary continues on this nonsense with the Electoral College, risks a civil war. This refugee experiment is a complete, utter failure. And again, it goes back to that founding principle of the liberal political philosophy that you can control what's in people's mind by controlling the environment around them. That is their core belief. They believe in it as strongly as the Scientologists believe in Xenu. And it's just as bogus. And that's why they keep making... Yeah, it is a cult. And that's why they keep making these huge, devastating mistakes and disasters. But it's always somebody else's fault.
Hey, Mike, did you notice the color Hillary was wearing when she was giving off that, we got to go after fake news? It was the color purple again. So this is not over yet.
Yeah, she's sending that signal, the imperial purple. I mean, it's definitely kind of a weird situation out there. But by the way, did you notice how tired and haggard she looks compared to when she was the day before the election? She's not looking good. Either she's cut the budget for the hair and the makeup or everything, or her health is really beginning to deteriorate, which is something to keep in mind.
That's why she doesn't have 4 years left, Mike.
Yeah, I think so.
70 years old, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, some people are still young and look at Buzz Aldrin, John Glenn, 95.
I just don't think she has the stamina to do this for another 4 years after Trump, That's a long time, and I think that she can't wait. She's that kind of person. I think
it could be, let me float something even more dangerous. If she is aware that her medical condition means she only has a few more months to live anyway, then she obviously wouldn't care if the Civil War got started by what she's doing. She just wants to stand up there, be inaugurated as the first woman president of the United States of America to go into the history books, and after that, if the country falls apart, she doesn't care anymore because she's not going to be around.
Which makes her extremely dangerous, her and her group right now. Very dangerous person these people are.
Yes.
And you can see it when they take somebody out of their car and they beat them up because they think they're Trump supporters. You know, like we said, the cult. And people should shun these people. Anybody who voted for Hillary shouldn't even talk to them, period. I know it's hard to say, but, you know, these people are either stupid or they're part of that neoliberal Marxist group.
Well, the vast majority of Hillary's supporters are what Stalin termed as useful idiots. You know, they're excited, they're enthusiastic, they believe the slogans and the jingles. They have absolutely no clue what's really going on, but they'll go on out there and, you know, do what needs to be done, the dirty work to serve the agenda. And it really is very scary to see that happening in the United States. I mean, Hillary's campaign basically was mirroring a lot of Adolf Hitler's rise to power, the brown shirt tactics especially. And now she's out there talking about the digital equivalent of book burning.
Yeah, you have a mixture of a Stalin, Hitler type of, you know, useful idiots and brown shirts blended in.
It's not a mixture. It's a standard recipe for tyrants. And it doesn't matter who's at the top, and it doesn't matter what they claim their political ideology is. It's the way these people always wind up operating because it's the only way they can get what they want over a population that, if given a moment to think about it, is going to reject the whole position.
And if you look how dangerous and stupid these people are, just look at that Schiff guy from California about how they're pushing this Russian propaganda against when Tucker Carlson was talking on Fox News. It was just, this is the kind of rhetoric they'll throw around.
Yeah.
And it's extremely dangerous, Mike.
Well, it would be dangerous if we didn't realize that it really is a gigantic load of USDA choice bovine excrement. And that's the problem the corporate media and the government are facing right now is nobody believes what they say anymore. And that's the uphill battle they're fighting. There's no way they can gain back that trust because everything that they're doing right now only further erodes that trust because all they can do is come up with another lie. You know, whatreallyhappened.com is working for the Russian propaganda ministry or Donald Trump is a Manchurian candidate and so forth. They can't start telling the truth. All they can do is lie again, and with each new lie, they're only cutting their own throats in terms of their credibility.
And Paul Craig Roberts, I mean, come on, right there. You know, they're out of control.
They are. They're in a panic. What's going on is a panic, and I've seen a lot of articles on the net about, you know, here comes the crackdown, and they're going to roll the tanks in and, you know, set fire to your servers and everything. No, it really feels more like it's a panic. It's disorganized and it's thrashing around. And I'll give you another example why I recognize it. And it goes. I wrote this on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com, but just real brief. In the early days of computer animation, you know, real Hollywood, the established power, the established name families and everything, viewed us all as, you know, a bunch of kids with some whiz-bang tricks, and occasionally they're useful and everything, but they're not a threat to the Hollywood establishment. They're still outsiders. And then there was that watershed moment of Jurassic Park, when all of a sudden everybody realized, oh, wow, what we used to do is now obsolete. Technology has rendered us obsolete. There's no catching up. What are we going to do? What are we going to do? And there was a panic. And I remember one of the people who had worked on some of them. There were some mechanical dinosaurs used in Jurassic Park where they had to interact with the cast and everything. And the company that made the mechanical dinosaurs was literally out there trying to imply that they had done the computer-animated dinosaurs, which looked far more impressive and realistic anyway. I mean, that's the panic that was going on. There were all these articles in the industry trade journals about just the incredible expense of computer animation and how they're always missing deadlines. And because these people aren't real Hollywood, it's impossible to work with them. They're spoiled. They think they're rising stars and blah, blah, blah. And, of course, today, hardly a movie gets made without computer animation. And so we're seeing the same thing. Up until this year, the U.S. government and the corporate media had deluded themselves into thinking that the independent media were just these fringe little people out there. They're not part of the establishment. They're not a threat to the establishment. We can, tolerate them and just ignore them with dignity. And then all of a sudden, Trump winning was the watershed when all of a sudden they had that moment, flash. Technology has rendered the old way of running a government obsolete, and there is no going back. And they're panicking exactly the same way all those Hollywood insiders did, exactly the same way the ruling class and the clergy reacted when Gutenberg rediscovered movable type printing, and all of a sudden ordinary middle class people could buy books and read and learn. And it was a huge shock to the system back then, and that's what we're going through right now. And I'm not saying it's going to be smooth sailing from here. I think we can probably assume from this point on that a lot of people, there are going to be people who get hurt. There have been people who've been hurt. There have been people who've already been killed. And that's a real risk that we all understand that we're taking. But in the long run, they're not going to be able to stop the march of progress. Nobody ever has. Hollywood now has accepted computer animation. The world in general has accepted literacy and inexpensive books and printing, and soon they're going to grudgingly accept a distributed, diverse citizen news system across the globe.
And that's a little wise after the video toaster, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, there was actually one TV show that was done on the video toaster.
Babylon 5 and Sequest. My friend worked on
Yes. And I was one of the original developers on the video toaster. I had a wire wrap version. I couldn't even close the computer case back up once it was installed because all the spaghetti that was out there. I wish I'd kept that.
Amiga was one of the best computers, Mike.
Oh, it was amazing. I loved that. I loved that machine. I really did. Anyway, listen, I'm going to let you go because we're running out of time, and I want to switch over to Buzlow in Kalamazoo. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
I'm doing good.
Hey, Mike, I was listening to your show last week, and I heard you mention that they gave Ellen DeGeneres an American Freedom Medal?
Yes.
Or something like that?
Yep.
Well, I heard that, and I kind of rolled my eyes and just let it brush off my back, thinking, all right, political correctness, everybody gets a trophy type thing. But now I heard today it's really getting out of hand because they're actually going to christening a ship in Britain for Elton John. Did you hear that?
Yeah, I heard that, and but in the case of Sir Elton John, he's brought a lot of money into the British economy, and that's a good.
I can understand.
Yeah, that's a good way to get a knighthood.
What I also heard too is that the boat doesn't carry any guns or ammunition; it just rams other boats from behind.
Oh, tacky, funny but tacky.
Hey.
But
I'm going to wait until they give you your American Freedom Award, okay?
Oh, I wouldn't hold your breath here. I'm not the kind of person that they give shiny gold things to make me look more impressive than I really am. I'm at the point right now. I don't care. It's pointless. It doesn't mean anything anymore when they're handing these things out like. They're handing these things out like they're prizes from a box of Cracker Jacks. I mean, they've totally discredited the Nobel Peace Prize. And as far as this Freedom Medal, Obama was simply handing them out to everybody who got up on TV and went out there supporting Hillary Clinton or bashing Donald Trump or, who was a supporter of this liberal agenda. And that's all it was. And that's not what the medal is supposed to be for. As the name says, it was established to honor civilians who are working in the cause of freedom. And getting on up there and attacking Donald Trump and mandating vaccines and everything's got nothing to do with freedom. But then look how the Nobel Peace Prize has been perverted. When they gave it to Al Gore's Group for Global Warming, what's that got to do with peace? And they've given it to some of the worst war criminals in history, including our current president. And
that was really ridiculous. I mean, the guy was, in office, less than a month, and he's being handed prizes?
Yeah, I mean that was really it. But that's part of how the propaganda works, because they will give plaques and medals and statues and everything to the people who they want the public to listen to and believe. And it's just part of the scam and the fraud. Oh, you want to listen to this person when he tells you humans are warming the earth because he's got statues and he's got Emmys and he's got medals and he's got all this other stuff. And these other people over here saying that the earth is actually cooling. They don't have plaques and medals or statues or anything, so you shouldn't pay attention to them. That's what that scam is all about. And that's why the Nobel Peace Prize goes to warmongers. And that's why the Freedom Medal goes to people who are simply out there propagandizing on behalf of Hillary Clinton.
Yeah, I hear it. All right, well, thanks, Mike. Appreciate it.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Real quick, Mo in Florida, what's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. Just stay with your theme there on global warming. I'm here in South Florida, and everybody's wearing sweaters and sweatpants. I know this doesn't mean anything, but necessarily.
No,
are you there?
Yeah, I'm here, and it actually does mean something here. It's actually unusually cool here in Hawaii. We're at nighttime, we're down into the mid-60s. And all those girls on the beach are going back to the one-piece bathing suits, which I find aesthetically offensive.
I'm doing very brief hula dances, but I'm sure you mentioned this, but you're aware of that 100 years ago, Shackleton and Scott's record down there in the Arctic. They proved that the sea ice hasn't changed at all. It's just cyclical.
Yeah, we ran that story a few days ago.
Okay.
And of course, the new one now is there's this gigantic crack that's opened up in part of the ice that's floating on the ocean, and they're saying, see, it's melting, it's global warming. Well, no, the ice forms on Antarctica, and like the glaciers everywhere else on Earth, it flows down the side and out onto the water, and every so often it gets so heavy that it will simply break off, and it's got nothing to do with warming or cooling. Okay, my
mind was Shackleton and Scott.
We got to let you go here because, unfortunately,
right,
we got to take another break for commercials, and we'll be right back. Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here, and we're going to take two more phone calls. Then we're going to close the phone lines so I can get back and actually get you some news here because I'm falling way behind on my talking points. We're going to go to Peter in Los Angeles. Aloha, Peter. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Michael. Happy Friday to you, man. Hey, listen, I wanted to just talk about, Mike, you know what happened to how many of your colleagues in the independent media are being, jammed and interfered with electronically the way you are?
As far as I know, most of them. Those who have very large server farms are a lot more able to deflect things. I'm on a single server, and as a result, it's unfortunately proven to be rather easy to overload it. But the good news is, and I just had the same question in an email, I've got things set up where the system responds to an attack, and it usually comes back anywhere between, a minute to 2 minutes. But the more I'm hacked, the more obvious it is I'm having an influence and an impact. What was that? The old Native American tribe, the Crow. The Crow used to believe that their greatness was measured on how mighty their enemies were. And so by that criteria, I must be doing a good job. Certainly if the Washington Post thinks I'm a Russian stooge, I've attracted some attention somewhere.
Well, Michael, you're having a tremendous impact, believe me. But the point I want to make is I don't believe that Hillary on her own could or even the Democratic Party upping it one level could successfully mount a sustained attack for so long on so many sites. I have to believe that this is, they're part and parcel. Of course, they're just the corporate media is just the mouthpiece, the stenographers for the government. I think this is done by the government, and I think this will.
You could very well be right. You could be very well be right. The reason it's definitely somebody who supports Hillary is given away by the specific files that they're trying to target to prevent them from being read by anybody else outside. But given that story coming out of Georgia, where the Department of Homeland Security was caught trying to hack their voter database, then yeah, it could very well be entities within the government, could even be the NSA. They certainly aren't spending any time actually catching real criminals and malware writers or anything like that. In fact, the problem just seems to be getting worse and worse the more money the NSA gets. But again, it's a war of attrition. In a way, it's kind of like the Battle of Britain. We just deal with each attack as it comes on in, and then one day the attacks will simply stop and it'll be over.
You know, and at some point, Mike, I have to wonder, and I'm hoping because of the relationship that Trump has with the corporate... Can I hang here? Or?
Yeah, go ahead and hang. We'll bring it back right after the network break. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to finish up here with Peter in Los Angeles. And what did you want to say?
Well, Mike, I'm just, you know, because of the almost totally adversarial relationship that Trump has with the corporate press and the corporate media, I would hope, of course, that this would change once he takes office. However, it may be that after a while that, you know, he doesn't like the way that the independent media reacts to what he's doing, you know, and then you look back at the CIA over the years and Mockingbird and all the things that they've done to control the press, and think that the intelligence community doesn't want to give up their ability to basically being
no, they really don't. Here's the problem they're dealing with. Okay, even back at the end of World War II, when Mockingbird began, the media had already gone through a considerable amount of consolidation. There were only a couple of hundred companies that were really in charge of the vast majority of news distribution in the country. Today it's even tighter than that. The problem they have with the independent media is there are thousands of websites out here. There are simply too many for them to be able to co-opt in an economic manner. And I think that's the reason why they're trying this desperation Hail Mary attempt of getting Americans to install plugins on their browsers so that the independent media can't get through. And I'll tell you right now, that's never going to happen. That's a non-starter right there. And again, we're dealing with an establishment that has simply, over the decades, gotten used to a certain way of running the country, and they're just now realizing technology has rendered that system of governance totally obsolete, and they're in a panic. They don't know what to do. The reality is they can't go on doing what they've been doing before. They're either going to have to adapt to a new reality of a better educated, self-informed populace, or they're going to go the way of the dodo bird and the Soviet Union.
Well, Mike, if there's, 6 big media companies, right, and I think we both agree that this is a fascist system, and the government, by cooperating with them, it's a partnership, really. And then there's the people over whose lines all this stuff goes, and there's only a couple of them, Sprint and so on and so forth. I see a permanent opposition to the independent media by both the carriers, the hold the wires over which it goes, the companies, the media companies themselves, the 6 big media companies, and the government and the intelligence community cooperating to try to tamp this renegade, uncontrolled from them anyways, press down. I don't think that's going to change even with Trump, really.
No, it's going to take a long while for things to sink on him. We may even have to wait for, some of these CEOs to actually stop being CEOs before they give up that fantasy that they can drag the world back to the glory days of the 1950s and 1960s Cold War. But like I said before, it's not going to be a smooth transition. As James Corbett said, right now we're literally in a media war. But the corporate media is carrying the burden of decades of flat-out lies to the American public, and the American public now knows that. Here in the independent media, people have gotten used to come to us to find out what's really going on. Oh, wow, turns out Saddam really didn't have those nuclear weapons after all, did he? And for anybody who's still confused about real news, fake news, I mean, there's your test. Who told you Saddam had nuclear weapons requiring an invasion? And who was out here telling you, no, he really doesn't, you're being sold a phony war? And that's all you need to remember to decide who's really the real news and who's really the fake news. And by the way, somebody wrote on in saying that when we talk about the real news, meaning the corporate media, TV networks, we need to remember it is an acronym that stands for rotten, egotistical, arrogant lying.
Well, Michael, I agree with everything you say on this, but I also would caution you to prepare for a long-haul battle on this.
I've been at this for 22 years, and I'm ready to do another 22.
All right, man. I'll be with you.
All right, thanks.
All right, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Before we take this next call here, got an update on the situation down in Florida where these 3 voters have filed a lawsuit demanding a statewide recount because they're absolutely convinced Hillary Clinton won Florida, and we know that Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin and all those independent media websites have cheated Hillary out of her rightful inheritance and blah, 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 blah. Well, under Florida law, as it turns out, they need to gather 120,000 affidavits from Florida voters saying that they were somehow robbed of their vote, blocked from voting, anything like this. And here's the kicker. All of those affidavits must be notarized. In other words, they can't just set up an office and crank out affidavits and just put people's names on them. Whoever's filing an affidavit has to go to a notary public, and yes, we know there were fake notaries used during that whole mortgage-backed security fraud. I don't see that as likely to happen by December 19th. And under Florida law, even if there's a dispute, the electors can still go to the Electoral College. We're going to take a moment here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just rejoining the network. We're going to take our last phone call before we close the lines and get back to the news. John in Barbados, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. Yes, I'm going to be a little tongue-in-cheek at the moment. A boat was named after Elton John, but I imagine a boat was really powerful, a tubby little tugboat.
Somebody already gave us the punchline on this one.
With a very loud foghorn, named the Rivero's Ranger, able to push all the big boats around in the harbour. So, if you want to really look at it, the little tubby tugboat would be whatreallyhappened.com, and the big boats that it's able to push around would be the mainstream corporate media.
Well, so first of all, I'm going to object to the phrase tubby because I've lost about 80 pounds so far on my weight reduction thing here, and the other part is being a rag setter. You know, I think it's a loose analogy. I think a better one would be that the corporate media is the Titanic, and I'm the iceberg.
Yes.
You know, I didn't attack them. They ran into me.
They're sinking fast. Anyway, I just want a quick shout-out. 97% of Aleppo is now in Syrian Arab army hands, and we're getting thousands upon thousands of witnesses giving evidence as to what these Takfiris have been doing to the people.
Oh, all kinds of torture and all of that stuff. I mean, it's really coming out. Supposedly, ISIS and Al-Qaeda are now trying to retake Palmyra to keep this war going a little bit longer. But with Aleppo back under Syrian government control, as you mentioned the other day, that frees up 20,000 troops. And instead of going down toward the Golan, those 20,000 troops can now march against Palmyra and whatever other strongholds ISIS still thinks they have. Again, the big issue for the United States is they can't get into Aleppo to extract their CIA assets, hired mercenaries, special forces people. It's only a matter of time before these people get captured and put on public display, unless they've all been given suicide capsules, and who knows, that may or Obama could drone strike them. Remember, we heard the U.S. was going to take out the ISIS and Al-Qaeda commanders who were dealing directly with the U.S. to get those weapons.
The other story I wanted to reiterate, from months ago I said that Russia was deploying these robotic guards on the border with the western border of Russia with along the Ukraine and the Baltic states. They've now used one of these, and there's a video of it, against a terrorist group. This robotic soldier actually killed all four, the leader and three of his acolytes. So this is now serious stuff. These robotic soldiers are now on the field of battle.
Well, good. We can keep our kids at home. Let's just have the robots fight the robots here. It's Battling Bots, the War Edition.
Yeah. Anyway, thank you for taking my call again, Michael. Yeah, I just thought you might enjoy that little tongue-in-cheek description of what really happened.
Well, except for the part about Tubby, I loved it. But I'm on this major weight loss program. I've dumped about 80 pounds so far. I got about another 40 to go, and then I'm going to buy all new clothes. All right, listen.
Well, you didn't mind the very loud foghorn then?
Absolutely. I don't have a problem with that one tiny bit.
Okay, Michael, thanks a lot, mate.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. We're going to close the phone lines for a little bit here because I'm way behind on my talking points here. As I mentioned before, a lot of politicians are coming on out saying that this campaign by Hillary to try and overturn the election is not making the United States look good in the eyes of the world or even the American people. Joe Biden basically has come on out and said he's embarrassed by what Hillary is doing. And I think that's probably true for all of the American people. We're embarrassed by this childish behavior on the part of Hillary and all of her supporters. And again, looking at her during her speech before Congress about the dangerous epidemic of fake news, it looks to me like her health is starting to fail. And if she's aware she doesn't have long to live, then she's just going to keep on pushing to be that first president of the United States and doesn't care if she starts a civil war. Now, WikiLeaks has come out with yet another document dump. This one is showing how the United States was playing Syria-style games in Yemen leading up to that conflict. And yes, it does involve Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton. Now, as I mentioned a couple of times before, Hillary Clinton has come out of her seclusion, and she addressed the Congress, I guess, as a private citizen. It's kind of interesting. I don't think Congress would let me in the door to talk to them as a private citizen, but she came on in to demand action against the epidemic of fake news. And she cited this woman in Florida who said she was going to kill somebody on Sandy Hook and the obviously contrived shooting up at the pizza parlor, saying that fake news represents a danger to the lives of ordinary people. And, of course, my first response to that is, when she says fake news is endangering people's lives, I wonder if she includes that fake news about Saddam's weapons of mass destruction that led to a war that resulted in thousands and thousands of deaths, including those people tortured to death by the U.S. to find those weapons of mass destruction, which turned out not to exist. Because I think compared to that, a gun fired into the ceiling of a pizza parlor and mere talk about killing somebody really kind of pales to insignificance. And I find it amazing for Hillary to be getting up there and screaming about the epidemic of fake news, this coming from Mrs. Vast Right-Wing Conspiracy herself, who has a long track record of lies, including under oath. And the hypocrisy is staggering. Brian Williams, caught lying to the public, still works for NBC, and he's out there saying that we need to crusade against false reporting. Look who's talking, Brian. It's like they think the American people don't have a memory. That anything that was said or done 24 hours ago is irrelevant, or if you're paying attention to it, you're just being a wild-eyed, tinfoil hat-wearing conspiracy wingnut kook or something. As one of our callers mentioned before, Congressman Adam Schiff actually called Fox News Tucker Carlson a Russian agent on primetime television. They're pushing this whole thing about Russia, Russia, Russia. They want a Cold War or a hot war. They don't care. Russia's the enemy. China's the enemy. You will hate who we tell you to hate. No, actually, we're all grown-ups. We can decide for ourselves who our enemies actually are. Now, the Washington Post is still refusing to retract or apologize for that story that smeared all of the independent media as being Russian propagandists. They've updated the story to saying, well, we're not really endorsing what Prop or Not said, but we think it's worth looking at. It's a non-denial denial is basically what it is. And going over to Prop or Not, they've now enlarged their report and revealed that their entire case to say XYZ is a Russian propaganda agent was that we linked to stories in Russia Today. Now, I have also linked several times to whitehouse.gov. Does that make me an official presidential spokesperson? I'm sure Obama would say, heck no. And the same logic applies. Linking to Russia Today does not make anybody a Russian agent. It just makes us people who trust Russia Today more than we trust ABC, NBC, CBS, Fox News, PBS, NPR, and so forth. Now, another website, Naked Capitalism, is demanding a Washington Post retraction. I hope they get it. The Washington Post owes all of us a retraction and an apology. They're not going to do it because they're struggling to maintain, well, we're still right. Even when we're wrong, we're right. And they're pushing this idea that the fake news is what cost Hillary Clinton the election, like Benghazi had nothing to do with it, the murder of Vince Foster had nothing to do with it, the Bimbo Squad had nothing to do with it. Private email server, classified documents leaking all over the world had nothing to do with it. The pay for play at the Clinton Foundation had absolutely nothing to do. And it's all just the fault of the fake news. Bill Mitchell actually got out there and said, which fake news story cost Hillary the election? Point to one that we can look at to determine if it's really fake or not. There will be a long time waiting to get a response to that. Now, Paul Craig Roberts is out there saying what we already know is true. Big money is trying to shut down all of our websites. They're trying to get our advertisers to cancel with us. They're trying to find any way they can get us blocked. One of the big problems with these so-called parental filter systems is they'll accept a submission of a site that should be blocked without actually vetting it themselves. And so it's very easy for somebody to go into, we will block your website from the world, or we will block your browser from anythinginteresting.com, and type in, oh, whatreallyhappened.com, they're showing cat juggling or something like that. And will be added to the block lists without them checking it, because they're lazy. And that means the owners of the websites then have to contact these blockers and say, please explain why you blocked my website. And inevitably, we get an email back saying, oh, it must have been blocked by mistake, we are now unblocking you. But it's taking up our time. It's another form of harassment. And it is a repeat of the McCarthy smear tactics. Oh, they're commie sympathizers. Destroy their careers. Too late. You did that 22 years ago. Now, 21st Century Fox is making a play to take over Sky News. And apparently we're going to see another huge attempt to consolidate global media and shackle it to the official government story of whatever it is they want to talk about. You know, try and buy up what few independent media outlets are out there and just buy it all up. And in the latest embarrassment this morning, MSNBC host Stephanie Ruhle accused Fox News of holding its Christmas party at Donald Trump's recently opened Washington hotel, talking about conflicts of interest. You know, oh, Fox News is all buddy-buddy with Donald Trump here, and, you know, we weren't invited, and all the rest of it. And, of course, this is a pushback against that leaked Podesta email that showed 65 top executives and prostitutes and correspondents of the corporate media palling it up with John Podesta and signing on to the Hillary Clinton campaign. And so they're out there saying, Fox News is having their Christmas party at a Trump hotel. How could they do that? Then later in the day, 2 p.m., Rule issued an apology saying, no, Fox actually went someplace else. Our bad. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about fake news and who the real fakers are. And when WikiLeaks started releasing emails from John Podesta, the Clinton campaign and the corporate media launched a campaign to claim they were all fakes and forgeries. That WikiLeaks was releasing fake documents. Now, many of these documents were duplicates of official emails that had, in fact, already been released by Judicial Watch Legal Action and the various congressional investigations. And people could confirm, yeah, this is verbatim, word for word. Now, it turns out that this entire claim trying to damage WikiLeaks, came from MSNBC's intelligence analyst Malcolm Nance. He, in turn, relied on a tweet saying, please be skeptical of alleged Podesta emails. Trumpists are dirtying the docks. That tweet, in turn, was linked to a tweet from an anonymous account calling itself the Omnivore, which posted a fake transcript purporting to be a Hillary Clinton speech to Goldman Sachs as released by WikiLeaks. Now, that document does not appear on the WikiLeaks server. And that was the entire basis for the MSNBC starting this claim that all of the WikiLeaks documents were doctored, with a fake document that never came from WikiLeaks. This is how they operate on this thing. Now, as we were talking about yesterday in response to a phone call, it turns out there's a gentleman out in Culver City, California, Justin Kohler. He's a liberal Democrat, and he runs a company called Disinfo Media that specializes in setting up phony news sites. A lot of them are made to look like real news sites and are used to plant bogus news on the Internet in the hope that the independent media will pick it up and be embarrassed by it. And it backfired because apparently some of the real corporate media picked up these stories and ran with them. But I mean, think about it. There's a guy who's got a company. Their entire business model is setting up phony news websites to plant junk stories on the independent media. I want to know who's paying this guy. It's obviously very, very, very secretive. Won't even admit how many of these phony websites belong to him. And here's another story from the phony media. Back in July, remember when the corporate media was publishing this story called the McLaren Report about how the Russians were doping their Olympic athletes. And it was all supposedly based on a confession from a Russian who'd been part of the doping situation. And it resulted in a near blanket ban on Russian track and field athletes participating in the Rio Games, a complete ban on the Russian athletes for the Paralympics. Well, the International Olympic Committee has just announced they have retested all the blood samples from the Russian athletes. Nothing was found. Nothing. It was a smear job to kick the Russians out of the Olympics so the Americans could win the medals and look good to the world. Remember that first gold medal we won? Shooting. Made the gun grabbers absolutely puke. The corporate media got the Russian Olympic team banned, and it was all a lie. Alrighty, now then, let's talk about the war zones. As we mentioned yesterday, Obama has granted a waiver for continued military support of fighters in Syria, bypassing the Arms Export Control Act. And Obama is out there justifying this, saying that we need to arm the fighters in Syria to fight the war on terror. They're not there to fight the war on terror. They're there to fight Assad. What Obama is saying is we're going to arm the terrorists to fight the war on terror, and it doesn't get any more Orwellian than that, does it? Meanwhile, of course, we're seeing reports in places like Russia today that there's no question these weapons will absolutely end up in the wrong hands again because it happened before. The weapons being given to the so-called moderate rebels inevitably wind up in ISIS and Al-Qaeda hands. All right, we're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Breitbart is now reporting that Harvard law professor and progressive liberal activist Larry Lessig has announced he's teaming up with a California-based law firm to offer free and confidential legal services to any members of the Electoral College who are going to violate their own state laws to vote against Donald Trump. And by the way, Lessig has served on the boards of numerous groups financed by billionaire George Soros. Now, I'm kind of wondering how this guy got to be a Harvard law professor, because he seems ignorant of the laws involving aiding and abetting, counseling, and procuring a criminal act. This falls under incitement to commit. And given that he's teamed up with this law firm, this actually represents a conspiracy to incite to commit violations of state election law. And these states would have every right to have this guy arrested and thrown in prison. And those lawyers out in California. And that is one of the real dangers of these liberals, liberaltologists. That's what we're going to call them from now on. The cult of liberaltology. Because they serve a higher and more noble purpose. It's okay for them to break the laws. Don't you break the law. You'd be a bad person. But it's okay for us to break the law. We serve a higher and more noble purpose. We serve the Empress Hillary. And now we have that link to George Soros. And that definitely, I think, is a demonstration that the Electoral College, if they vote against Donald Trump, is not acting in good faith, and that gives Congress the right to overrule. They are going to start a civil war with this. I can't imagine that's what they want, but that's where we're headed. I was optimistically, perhaps naively, foolishly thinking that Donald Trump winning the White House might turn things around and get us back on the path to being a constitutional republic. But this might be the very beginning of the dissolution of the United States, the way the Soviet Union went. Maybe it is too far gone to be saved. Now, Representative Tulsi Gabbard, and I'm so happy she's from here in Hawaii, and I think she would have made a good Secretary of State. And she's being interviewed on CNN, and CNN's going on about, oh, these terrorists, we've got to fight the terrorists. And Tulsi says the U.S. is supplying these people, which we all know. It's been documented time and time again. And Tulsi has introduced a resolution into the House of Representatives called the Stop Arming Terrorists Act. And its goal is to stop the spending of U.S. taxpayer dollars on supporting and arming international terrorist groups through covert operations and third states, third parties. Everybody knows what's going on. Everybody knows how the U.S. is conducting foreign policy. And that's another reason they're angry with the independent media, because we won't cover it up for them. And the people who are paid millions of dollars to successfully cover it up aren't being successful any longer, are they? All right, well, there's an interesting little video on the front page of whatreallyhappened.com. It's over in eastern Aleppo. The civilians are having a street party with the Syrian army, and they're just having a good old time. Their food is coming on in. Their lives are coming back. People are returning to their homes. And, of course, over in the U.S. government, the White House and the Pentagon, they're gritting their teeth because the Syrian people are supposed to be afraid of the Syrian army because they're going to take them to Assad, and Assad is going to torture them slowly to death and use sarin gas on them, and they're not supposed to be happy. It makes us look bad. And anything that makes the U.S. government looks bad has to be nuked. Drone strike. Now, the U.S. Navy, as part of this ramping up of Russia bad, Russia bad, Russia bad, is now searching for a hypothetical Russian carrier killer submarine that is supposedly prowling the Mediterranean following the NATO warships. And they're going on out and doing a sub-hunt. They don't actually have any evidence one is there. And they're just out there saying they might be there. These might be the Oscar II vessels that are carrier killers. Well, given the quality of our carriers, like the Gerald R. Ford, I think any kid with a pea shooter is a carrier killer at this point. I think we reported about 2 years ago, the Joint Chiefs called in a Navy admiral for a consultation and said, if we go to war with Russia or China, what is the life expectancy of our carrier battle groups? And this admiral said, going to be about a week. 2 if you keep them in their home port, which was not what the Joint Chiefs wanted to hear. The danger here, though, in the Mediterranean, and remember, the NATO and the U.S. tooling around the Mediterranean would be like Russia tooling around the Gulf of Mexico, just to understand who's threatening who's rattling their sabers. But the U.S. probably, if you look at how they brought about Pearl Harbor and sacrificed all those people in the Lusitania and so forth, it's not beyond the realm of possibility to suggest that the U.S. might sink a NATO ship and say, oh my goodness, look what those evil people in Russia did, and launch World War III for real. They are desperate. Remember, cornered animals are the most dangerous, and these people are feeling very cornered. And we all have to be very cautious and very, very skeptical. Now, over in Turkey, the ruling AKP party is submitting a bill to Parliament tomorrow that will bring about constitutional changes, switching Turkey to an executive presidency, which will give Erdogan much more power than he already has. I think Erdogan is becoming the real wild card in that part of the world, the loose cannon on deck, as it were. Meanwhile, Congress has approved $600 million for Israel's missile defense. This includes cooperation on R&D programs, purchases of Iron Dome, David Sling, and Arrow 3, and meanwhile the people of Flint, Michigan still have highly toxic water coming out of their faucets. It kind of makes you wonder, who does Congress think they're really working for? You know, billions and trillions for the Pentagon, millions for Israel, and all this other stuff here. What about the people of America? No, it's not in the budget. Clean, healthy drinking water is not in the budget. Couldn't afford it this year. Government is choosing, government is prioritizing, and our priority is to take money away from you and give it to Israel. And if you question that, then you're just being a dirty, filthy, Jew-hating anti-Semite who wants Hitler to come back and gas the Jewish babies in the ovens. Story coming out of fee.org, Mirror, Mirror on the Wall, whose country is freest of them all, and the article is about basically a ranking of the status of personal liberty in various countries. And this reminded me very much of that wonderful speech from HBO's The Newsroom. Okay, out of the 159 countries that were scored on the issue of personal freedom for their people, the United States ranked 24. So going on back to that wonderful speech where one of the other people on the stage said, what makes America the greatest nation on earth? We have freedom. Not according to this survey. Let's turn to the economic news here. Italy is now requesting an emergency bailout from the European Stability Mechanism, which is basically this giant slush fund of emergency bailout money that they rush in and throw over any bank that's about to collapse and take the system down. And Italy's banking system is in serious trouble because of Renzi's referendum collapsing. And you need to understand the complexities of the situation here. The reason the referendum collapsed is the referendum was going to save the banks by taking more away from the people of Italy. Anytime any bank, anywhere in the world, gets into trouble, what's their first solution? Oh, well, we have to have more money from the people. We've seen it here in the United States for more than a decade. TARP, bailout, bail-in, haircut, scalping, whatever you want to call it. Now there's negative interest rates. Now they're talking about a war on cash, so you have to keep your money in the bank, and the bank can dip into it with fees, negative interest rates, and in the event of emergency, they can just grab it for themselves. How to be the best bank robber on earth? Own that bank. Now, the U.S. government is still out there touting a 4.6 unemployment rate. Huzzah, huzzah, the economy is almost recovering. Donald Trump's inheriting a tremendously wonderful economy, and when it all falls apart, it's all his fault. No, we have 95 million people who are not in the labor force. And the government arbitrarily says, well, if they stop looking for work, then we're not going to count them as unemployed. How do people look for work if there are no jobs out there? This is just another classic example of the government cooking the books to lie to you and the corporate media feeding to you as if it is the gospel truth. 95 million legal American citizens willing and able to work but unable to find jobs for years does not map to a 4.6 unemployment rate. It is a flat-out lie by the government and reinforced by the corporate media that then dares to declare the independent media the fake news. More and more evidence is coming out in this court case about the silver market being rigged. And we know that's been going on. They need to keep gold and silver prices down for two reasons. One, they don't want you closing your savings account and going into precious metals, or liquidating your stock portfolio and going into precious metals. So they always have to keep the gold and silver less attractive than a savings account or the stock market. And the other reason is we have all these bullion centers like the New York Federal Reserve, J.P. Morgan, and the rest are trying to buy up gold to make good on all the gold that had been deposited in their bullion vaults and then somehow had gone out the back door. They're trying to make good on that, and obviously they want to get the gold as cheaply as possible. And again, like we're already seeing happening over in India, when they declare a cashless society, they will ban private ownership of gold and probably silver. In fact, they'll ban the ownership of anything that represents a portable store of value so that you can keep your wealth under your control rather than just simply having it at the bank's discretion to do whatever they want with. And that completes the evolution of the loss of our freedom over our own money. When this country started, the coinage was the money, the valuable metals in the coin, the silver and the gold, were the money. That was it. And once you had that coin in your hand, it was under your control. You could put it in your pocket, you could spend it, you could bury it in a mayonnaise jar out by the pineapple plantation, and there was nothing the government or the bankers could do to alter the value of that money. That was freedom. With the establishment of the Federal Reserve and the removing of silver content from the coinage following Kennedy's assassination, control of the value of the money passed from you to the government and the banks. You have no control. You can work very hard and build up a stack of money that you're going to go buy, for example, a new Honda. And the government can just all of a sudden say, well, we need to change the exchange rate. And all of a sudden that Honda that you were about to pay for is now twice as expensive. You are now a slave to the bankers and the government, who now have control over the wealth of the money you already worked for and earned. And this is the final step, to force you to have all of your wealth in the bank, so the bank is now basically running your commerce for you and charging a hefty fee. And it's impossible to have a run on the bank because there's no way for the bank to hand you your wealth in a tangible form. All they can do is send it to another bank. Now, I remember the last time there was a population of workers who worked and were provided for, but were not allowed to have their own money. It was called the antebellum plantations. That's where we're headed with this cashless society. It's a new form of enslavement to force us to be dependent on the banks. The banks will be our lords and masters because we cannot conduct commerce without their blessing. Oh, Lord Banker, may I have your leave to buy a loaf of bread for my family. Oh, Lord Banker, may I have your leave to put gas in my car. Call it neo-feudalism, if you will. Getting on back to this silver rigging. More and more information coming out in federal court. A UBS trader literally called this group of financial institutions rigging the silver prices as the mafia. And he may not be that far from reality. Over in Great Britain, homeless people will be fined up to $1,300 for sleeping on the sidewalks. Gee, I wonder what brilliant politician passed that law. How do you expect these homeless people to pay the fine? If they had $1,300, they'd be in a hotel or an apartment, wouldn't they? Shows you just how completely out of touch and clueless politicians are. Oh, there's a homeless problem. They're sleeping on the streets and inconveniencing the tourists here. Well, we'll just fine them. $1,300. That sounds good. We'll do that. And they voted it on through. $1,300 fine for sleeping on the sidewalk. Yeah, that'll teach them. Anyway, I'm not the only one concerned about the cashless society. Over at Casey Research, they're saying the push for a cashless society is the worst thing to happen to the U.S. dollar since 1913. They're absolutely right. They're trying this out already over in India. That's the first test case. And they've almost locked up the economy. And they are raiding the homes of rich people and confiscating the gold. And I have no animosity toward the people of India, but I hope they crash the system and demonstrate this is not going to work before it's applied to the entire globe, crashes that system, and then we're all seriously buggered. We're going to take a break here for commercials. We're coming up on the top of the hour, and the lovely Lady Claire, and we'll be right back after these words from our sponsors. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. Coming up on the top of the hour, and the lovely Lady Claire. Now, out in California, State Senator Kevin DeLeon has introduced a bill, Senate Bill 54, called the California Values Act. Apparently, if you disagree with this legislation, then you're just being an immoral, racist sphincter. And it explicitly prohibits state and local law enforcement agencies from investigating, detaining, detecting, reporting, or arresting people for immigration enforcement purposes. Moreover, the bill would force public schools, hospitals, and courthouses to establish safe zones that limit immigration enforcement on their premises. Now then, let us turn to the Federal Immigration and Nationality Act, Section 8, U.S. Code 1324, where it says any person who encourages or induces an alien to reside in the country is in violation of the law. For each individual alien involved, you can be fined and imprisoned for not more than 5 years or both. So when you're looking at the total illegal immigrant population of California and you multiply that times 5, this state senator could go away for the rest of his life and change. And it basically goes on to basically say that anybody, a person including a group of persons, business, organization, or local government commits a federal felony when they assist an alien they should reasonably know is illegal in the U.S. by transporting, sheltering, or assisting them to obtain employment. In other words, all of these people running all of these sanctuary cities are all now felons. And in many of these states, there are laws saying felons cannot hold office. All right, let's take a quick phone call before the top of the hour. Sherry in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Mike. Yeah, I wanted to say something about fake news. Before our news was called fake news, our news, I think that some thought went into what they were going to call it, because I think fake news instead of false news was used maybe because we have conspired to make it untrue. You know, there's a conspiracy.
Okay, well, you're throwing around the collectives like we and our news, and I'm not sure whether you're talking about the independent media, the corporate media. So you need to clarify that so that we're not confused what you're talking about. I think the term fake news was simply created like conspiracy theorist, to simply a label to throw on out and say, well, they're now the fake news. Mahi dictum est. You should not pay attention to them when they tell you Saddam did not have nuclear weapons, and you should only listen to us when we tell you that Vladimir Putin is building a Death Star and will kill you all unless we invade Russia.
Right. Yeah, that's right. And I think it smacks of conspiracy, like, you know, and they're attributing that to us. Now, I'm not looking to change that, but I have no problem accusing them, the corporate media, of spreading false news as opposed to true news.
Well, that's what we're certainly doing that. I mean, my website and dozens of others.
Oh, yeah.
We're putting up these catalog lists of all of these lies the corporate media has put out, and you know, it's a huge amount, and that is the that's the uphill battle they're fighting. Anyway, Sherry, got to let you go. Got to do a station identification, and we'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on BAM User TV, this gorgeous creature sitting behind me is the lovely Lady Claire, who joins us on Fridays with her unique perspective on the world. And what is the first thing you want to share with us?
Well, Mike, I know that you talked to our audience about the teacher who went off on the rant about the election of Donald Trump as being an act of terrorism. It gets worse. Apparently, the kid who filmed this with his camera phone is now being threatened with legal action and expulsion.
Oh, you don't expose the liberals. He's now part of the fake news. He's a Russian agent. He's a Russian agent. Take him out and have him shot.
And what he said, and he was quoted as saying, this isn't education, this is propaganda. Now, because both of us are very strongly First Amendment people, I have no problem whatsoever with this lady sharing her opinion, no matter how unglued it may be from reality.
Well, let's look at the context. I have no problem with this professor saying that the election was an act of terror on her own time as a private citizen.
Yeah.
No, but she was in class.
Yeah.
Okay? Now, when I taught at the University of Hawaii, I never brought politics into the classroom. I was there to teach computer animation, and that's all we ever talked about. That's what I was being paid to do. Okay? Now, maybe if this lady is being paid to propagandize the children against Donald Trump, that's another whole scandal right there.
Yeah.
Okay? We all have a right to our opinions, but only in a public space or the privacy of our own home. When you are at your workplace, when you're at school, you're supposed to be doing the job you're paid to do, and I seriously don't think the administrators of this school are going to stand up and say, yes, we were paying her to teach the students that the election of 2016 was an act of terror.
Yeah, and I hope if, in fact, the school does attempt to withdraw this student, that he finds the best First Amendment pro bono attorney in this country and just kind of will not let that stand, because this to me was an abuse of her power in the extreme.
Well, it was very inappropriate for her to bring her politics into the classroom, and I would encourage this student to contact Judicial Watch, who may not have standing to operate in California, but certainly would know somebody in California who would take that on. In fact, I have a name that just occurred to me.
Yes, I know that name.
If we could get in touch with this guy, I'm going to connect them up.
Okay, all right. I think that would be very good.
I think that would be a really good thing to do.
And very interestingly, I want to bop over to the U.S. military. Apparently, the U.S. Navy is refusing Pentagon orders to budget cuts for spending cuts. And Congress has passed the 2017 military spending bill. However, the Navy says that they are not going to do any cuts whatsoever. Ray Mabus.
What are they going to do? Sail a battleship up the Potomac and train the guns on the Congress and say, give us the money?
Yeah, and he says these cuts are intolerable. And I think that what President-elect Trump has to do is to crack down on fraud with weapons, ships, and fighter jets which do not perform as they're supposed to. Remember the littoral ships, which were supposed to be the crown, and they're breaking down left, right, upside down, and backwards.
Zumwalt broke down here, the F-35, the Gerald Ford. I mean, it really has become a joke. But I think Trump, and in fact, indeed, the entire Congress when you're seeing the Navy stand up and say, no, you will give us the money we tell you to give. It does feel like the entire government is starting to fracture and fragment the way the Soviet Union did.
Yeah. Now, what I would suggest to President-elect Trump is that in all of these contracts for weapons systems, planes, ships, weaponry of any kind, there should be a rider that if these items fail, the contractor will fix it at their own expense.
No, they never get that.
They should.
I mean, the entire military procurement system is completely corrupt. And Eisenhower did try and warn us about the dangers of allowing this huge military-industrial complex to continue after the conclusion of World War II, because it would acquire so much money and so much political influence that they would basically write the laws for themselves, and we're seeing it in this declaration by the U.S. Navy that they are going to defy the will of Congress and sit there and demand more money. Oh, okay.
Yes, I'm sorry, I was swallowing. And the other thing I was thinking about, and I think this would definitely have an effect, is that if systems fail, the heads of corporations and the boards of those corporations do hard jail time.
Well, unfortunately, corporate law says that the corporate executives are shielded from any kind of a downturn from accident, market fortunes, and so forth. The only time you can jail them is if you are able to prove criminal intent and wrongdoing. But in this day and age, especially looking at Wall Street, even with these bankers being hauled into court for criminal wrongdoing, they're never sent to jail. They just get more taxpayer money to go back to doing what they're doing. We're going to take a second here to do a shout-out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. We're in hour number 3, and the lovely Lady Claire is with us once again. We're talking about Pentagon waste, and we're talking about how the U.S. Navy is literally saying they refuse to accept the budget cuts in the current defense appropriations bill, which raises this ludicrous image of the Navy sailing a warship up the Potomac and, holding up Congress, saying, give us the money that we want.
Yeah, it's getting really strange out there. And the Pentagon did something I thought was rather interesting this last week. Absolutely no evidence, but the Pentagon tried to convince Turkey that Iran had killed their troops in an attack in late November. Now, ISIS was quick to take credit for the bombing, so it wasn't clear why Turkey needed a solid week to concede that their initial claim of the airstrike was wrong. The Pentagon, however, is trying to sell Turkey on the idea that everyone is wrong, and Iran attacked them for no apparent reason. And there were unnamed Pentagon officials who were sourced in the Turkish press, and they offered no reason for Iranian involvement, but noted that the site of the attack, which was apparently an ISIS suicide attack, was close to some places where Shiite militias are located. And since Iran is a Shiite state, it might have been Iran. Hello.
Well, I mean, that is a very flimsy line of reasoning, but again, remember, Wesley Clark blew the whistle that the real U.S. military agenda was conquering all of the resource-rich areas of the Middle East and shackled their oil to the U.S. dollar, ending with Iran in 2008. Obviously, we're 8 years overdue.
Yeah.
We're on the verge of losing Syria. Afghanistan and Iraq are quagmires. Yemen and Libya are turning into quagmires. And they're still out there holding out. We're going to get into Iran. We're going to go and war is beautiful. War is great. War is fun.
Yeah. And what really concerns me is apparently in the 21st century, the American Pentagon has become a fact-challenged, conspiratorial false narrator, attempting to anger Turkey against Iran when there's no shred of evidence to support the claims. And if American Pentagon officials were talked to, I want them named. I want them on the record.
Oh, you never get the names.
I want the names.
One of the hallmarks of the corporate media, the so-called real news, the rotten, egotistical, arrogant liars.
Yes.
It's always an anonymous, unnamed source, but it was a government source, therefore you should believe them. Actually, no. If they're a government source, we should assume that they're lying to us again. And this Pentagon piece of propaganda may be in response to the clear signs that Turkey is pivoting away from Europe and the United States and NATO, and it is, in fact, moving closer to Russia, China, and Iran.
Which would make sense for it, absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely. Speaking of Iran, there was an event this last week that needs to be noticed. There was a meeting of the cabal united against a nuclear Iran, UANI, I guess is the acronym, and packed with a bunch of people who are war hawks and neocons. And the event was headlined by none other than Representative Ileana Ros-Lehtinen, Republican Floridan, from Florida. And Joe Lieberman saw calls to restore coercion against Iran, with several figures advocating that the U.S. not accept the limits of sanctions alone by sinking Iranian naval vessels in the Persian Gulf.
What they're basically talking about is we don't care if Iran is keeping all of its P5+1 commitments. We want a war with Iran. We've worked for it. We deserve it, and nobody's going to stop us. And, yeah, when they're out there talking about just arbitrarily, without provocation, attacking the warships of another nation, that is basically an undeclared war and a war crime. But I made this observation back on Election Day when Trump won, and I said those elements within our government and economy that are dependent on war are going to try and start one before Trump can take office and pull the plug on it. Where that may fail, of course, is that Donald Trump, being from the world of business, is probably a little less concerned with his place in history than career politicians who go to sleep every night dreaming of their face on postage stamps and currency and statues being built to them so that all the pigeons of the world may rejoice. Trump does have an ego. We've seen that in the architecture of his hotels and everything. But Trump, I think, could go into that Oval Office, pick up the phone, call Russia and China and everybody else and say, this is nonsense. This is really stupid. Let's find a way to call this all off and pull the plug here. And Trump has to understand, if he's got good advice coming from the military, he has to understand the U.S. can't win these wars. And the big problem is that the primary driving force behind the war agenda are the banks, because they make more money off of the debt created by war than anything else. And the longer the war goes on, the more money they make. And because they make money off of both sides, they don't care which side wins or loses. That's the real crime of it. They're making money off of both sides. They don't care if the United States is destroyed in a war with Russia and China because the money is still going to pour on in from all the debt slaves.
And I do have another observation and another angle on this. Israel has been long demanding some kind of U.S. attack against Iran, even to the point of threatening to do it themselves, which will probably inevitably lead to war against both Iran and Russia. And apparently there was an article last August, Israeli speculation over Iran strike reaches fever pitch. And I have to wonder, Mike, if that huge $38 billion military aid package to Israel was the secret component of a quid pro quo for Israel not attacking Iran.
Oh, that wouldn't be the first time that Israel's played that game. We've seen it over and over throughout the years. We're going to attack Iran. No, don't attack Iran. Here's some money. All right, we're going to attack Iran. Here's some more money. Don't attack Iran. We're going to attack Iran. No, here's some more money. And it's just
a pattern.
Yeah, it's a pattern. It's a repeating pattern. We've seen it time and time again.
And the Israeli firsters are not giving up on this. And this call to restore coercion against Iran, from my perspective, is nothing less than total and complete insanity. I am sorry, but these folks have collectively lost their reality licenses to be advocating such reckless U.S. military actions, and they need to be gently housed in soft, locked facilities.
With Play-Doh.
With Play-Doh.
To deal with their...
And soft toys preventing any choking hazards. Look,
absolutely.
The P5+1 may be many things, and it's not perfect, but going to war against Iran right after Trump is inaugurated is one of the most idiotic things I think I've heard.
No, the goal there is to try and go to war against Iran before Trump is inaugurated.
Yeah.
The goal is to get into a shooting war with Russia before Trump gets inaugurated. Because Trump is already out there talking about normalizing relations with Russia, and Putin's already on board with that. Now Trump is talking about we need to be closer to China, and let's go back to being friends there. And this is a big threat to the current establishment, which doesn't know how to manufacture, doesn't care about the fact that nobody around the world can eat any American agriculture without getting sick from it.
Yep.
They just want a war to force the rest of the world to go on propping up the United States like the failed Roman-style imperium it has become.
Right. And the other thing that the U.S. government has forgotten how to do is good faith negotiations rather than war.
Well, again, going back to the P5+1, right now the entire world understands that if the U.S. government makes you a promise, if they sign a treaty, it's completely and utterly worthless.
Yeah.
The United States government has no credibility, not just with the American people, but with other governments around the world. In fact, I think it was not too long ago, somebody in Russia was saying it's impossible to figure out what the U.S. government is doing because nothing they say can be relied on.
Yeah. And it was interesting. Speaking about the U.S., apparently there is optimism on the economy and this huge stock surge. There was a survey, and the election of Donald Trump has brought with it a surge of optimism in the United States over the economy and stocks not seen in years. And there was a percentage of Americans who believe the economy will get better next year, and it's jumped an unprecedented 17 points to 42%, which is, I think very significant.
Well, it's good that they're more optimistic. But the problem with the soaring stock market is the stock market all by itself doesn't mean the economy is getting any better. We still have 95 million legal American citizens willing and able to work that have not been able to find jobs for years. The economy has to be picked up as a whole, not just instant money from the Federal Reserve poured into Wall Street to run those numbers up and make them look good, because we're seeing the stock market itself is now becoming another bubble, waiting for a needle to come in and burst it. Right now, though, a lot of the propaganda we're getting from the corporate media is that the economy is recovering, it's doing wonderful, look at the stock market, the unemployment is down to 4.6%. They're trying to create this idea that Donald Trump is inheriting a perfectly working operational economy because when it does collapse on his term, they're going to dump the blame for it all on him, just like they did with Herbert Hoover back in the 1930s.
Right. And I really think, Mike, if the American people give Trump half a chance, they're going to find him infinitely more centrist and infinitely less of a warmonger than Hillary Clinton would ever have been.
Well, Donald Trump is already out there saying that under his administration, this policy of covertly or overtly toppling foreign governments is going to stop because it really is a failed policy. We didn't get to Iran in 2008. We're stuck in these quagmires in Afghanistan and Iraq. The entire Middle East, on whose oil we are dependent, hates our guts. And it is time for a major change in that attitude. Now, I want to say again, Donald Trump is not going to be able to accomplish anything all by himself. He's got power and authority as the president, but he's facing an obstructionist Congress. And we didn't get rid of enough of those old incumbents, the Israel firsters and whatnot, which proves election fraud is not confined to the presidential election.
Right.
Donald Trump is going to office with the corporate media in a very adversarial position, and if Trump is going to succeed in accomplishing anything useful in this country, it's going to be only if we, the American people, are behind him and supporting him. And when Donald Trump says this must change, 300 million Americans need to stand up and say, yes, we agree. Change this the way Trump says.
I agree, absolutely. And I think the Democrats are going to do everything that they can to absolutely stymie and stop his first 100 days.
They've announced it. They're going to drag out the confirmation proceedings. The Democrats are already saying whatever Trump is for, we're automatically against. They're not even going to consider the merits of the law. And again, they're all behaving like a bunch of spoiled children. They're thinking about ego and payback and gotchas. And what is good for the nation as a whole doesn't even occur to them anymore. Whether they're just so focused on whoever their masters are and their supporters are, or slavery to Israel, or maybe they're all just taking way too many prescription antidepressants, but they're not really thinking in terms of any other interests than their own immediate ones, and that is certainly a tremendous, tremendous danger. And with this idea of standing shoulder to shoulder, Donald Trump, I'm thinking of reviving a website I started many, many years ago called Vine.org. And Vine was sort of a play on the idea of a grassroots movement, and it stood for Voting is Not Enough. And the whole point was to say our involvement in the political process does not end on Election Day. Got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. And Claire, what is your next story?
Well, it's a very sad day of remembrance as we remember the very courageous journalist, Gary Webb, who did something that was absolutely amazing. He died under some very mysterious circumstances. Amid the mainstream media's current self-righteous frenzy against fake news, it is worth recalling how the big newspapers destroyed Gary Webb, an honest journalist who exposed some very hard truths about Reagan's administration's collaboration with Nicaraguan Contra cocaine traffickers. Webb's reward for reviving that important scandal in 1996 and getting the CIA's Inspector General to issue what amounted to an institutional confession in 98 was to have the New York Times, the Washington Post, and LA Times lobby for and essentially get his banishment from journalism.
Now, you need to understand this whole Contra cocaine situation is the wellspring from which the Bush-Clinton narcocracy duopoly sprang.
Yeah.
And it began in the mid-1980s when the CIA was running what was called Operation Screwworm to smuggle guns down to Nicaragua to arm the Contras. And because this was illegal for them to do, they couldn't go to Congress for the money, so they funded it by bringing cocaine back along the smuggling pipeline into the United States to sell to your children. And the northern end of that pipeline was in Arkansas under then Governor Bill Clinton. And everybody involved was making money, hand over fist, made enough money to mount, major political campaigns and begin these careers of corruption. And again, it's a replay of the corruption that was seen during Prohibition, when those who were selling alcohol, the bootleggers, the rum runners, literally bought their way to the highest levels of the U.S. government. The same thing has been replaying for the last 30 years, only it's not alcohol, it's opium and heroin, and it's being sold to your kids. And that's where the Bush and Clinton political fortunes came from. And your corporate media, who claim that they are the real news, helped cover it all up and went on the attack on anybody who was getting even anywhere near close to what was going on in MENA. There was another article, Sally Denton and Roger Morris did a very well-researched article for the Washington Post, The Crimes of MENA.
And they spiked it.
And Washington Post managing editor Bob Kaiser, who was a skull and bones brother with President Bush, spiked it without explanation, even though the Washington Post lawyers had looked at it, checked all the facts, and said, this is solid. This really happened. They've got the evidence. And ultimately, Roger Morris and Sally Denton wound up having to sell the story to Penthouse magazine. Of course, their critics were saying, well, look, if it's published in Penthouse, then it can't possibly be real.
No credibility here.
If it's over at what really happened, it can't be real. Only what shows up at the Washington Post is real, including all these Russian stooge independent media.
In the article that I was looking at, they used the phrase about Gary Webb's end of life as committed suicide, which I put in quotes, because Webb did not commit suicide. It was simply the most convenient explanation for his death by those in government who never wanted his Iran-Contra story to get out, even though it was the truth. And it was reported in December of 2004. Coroner Gary Webb's death confirmed as suicide. And the article goes on to state, we're still treating this as very suspicious. They have flip-flopped again.
They ought to, because, the official story is he committed suicide by shooting himself in the back of the head twice.
Yeah. Now, if there are any forensic coroners out there who can back this up, call into the show and say Claire wanted to talk to me, because I am betting a plug Turkish piastre that none will be able to say that with a straight face.
Well, if they can, then they've got a big future in the corporate media.
Oh, yeah. And so we're supposed to swallow this absolute impossibility that this guy shot himself twice? Mike, that is utter and complete bull biscuits. I'm sorry.
Well,
no
if he
way.
shot himself in the shoulder, maybe, but we're talking about the back of the head.
There's no way.
Yeah, it simply doesn't happen.
Most likely this was an extrajudicial assassination.
It absolutely was. Put a hold on there. We're going to come back to it after these words from our sponsors. Oh, hi, America. Welcome back to our show. We're talking about Gary Webb, who wrote a series of stories for the San Jose Mercury News, laying out the fact that the whole Iran-Contra scandal was not just about gun running down to the Nicaraguan Contras, but would also involve the smuggling of tons of cocaine back into the United States of America to pay for it all. And what the Whitewater investigation was all about was a network of banks, land flips, and an Arkansas government office, the Arkansas Development Finance Authority, that acted as the money laundry, where the money would come on in from cash and be laundered around, and then the Arkansas Development Finance Authority would write checks to the companies that were supporting the resupply to the Contras as supposed business development loans that never had to be repaid. And, of course, when the Whitewater investigation got too close to the fact that the government was engaged in massive drug running, corrupting our youth and violating its own laws, that's when Ken Starr basically came on out and distracted America with the stained blue dress and Monica Lewinsky and just, forget about government drug running. We have a tawdry little sex scandal. Ooh, look at the blue dress. Pay no attention to all the cocaine pouring into our streets.
Misdirection, like they do in magic. Yeah.
And it's important to understand Kenneth Starr got that job because he'd been early in his career, he'd been the assistant to Ronald Reagan's Attorney General, William French Smith, who was the Attorney General who changed the rules to allow the Central Intelligence Agency to be involved with drug smugglers without being required to report it to the Drug Enforcement Administration. This, of course, was the CIA's license to smuggle, and they took full advantage of it.
Oh, yeah, they absolutely
And that's
did.
what Gary Webb uncovered, for which he was killed. And the corporate media, which today insists they're the real news, and covered it all up. Oh, it's a suicide. Yes, he shot himself in the back of the head twice. That's a suicide. If you question that, then obviously you're a Russian stooge, and you're trading sloppy wet kisses with Vladimir Putin.
Thank you, no. I'd like to bop over to...
I'd play chess with him. He'd probably clean my clock, but I'd love a chess game with him.
Oh, that would be remarkable to watch. There was an article in The Guardian, and it talked about Chinese factories making some of this year's allegedly must-have Christmas toys.
That include the one that spies on your kids and sends what they say to a defense contractor?
But apparently Barbie, Thomas the Tank, and Hot Wheels are made by staff that are working like 11, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, lousy accommodations, lousy situations.
And no pay.
And, almost...
It sounds like whatreallyhappened.com. Did we move to China? I'm working 12 hours a day and getting no money.
Did we wake up in the wrong country?
I was going to say, gung yi fat choy and whatever going on. Okay.
And I think this is where the American consumer needs to pull back and use a lot of what my late grandfather called horse sense, and not allow themselves and their kids to be propagandized as to what these so-called must-have toys are for this Christmas, when these toys are made through the practice of nearly slave labor condition.
And all of them are basically package promotions for movies and TV shows. Yeah. We were down at the local Toys R Us doing some shopping, and we needed to pick up a couple of Christmas tree ornaments for the tree at Claire's church and whatnot. Everybody put pictures in an ornament. And they had a rack of Christmas ornaments. Every single one of them was decorated with a branded character from some movie or TV show.
Yeah.
I searched for half an hour in vain for any ornament that wasn't somebody's advertising. Now, I'm a little picky about Christmas ornaments. The rule in our house when we have a Christmas tree, we had one last year, we're not bothering with one this year, but the rule is everything on the tree has to have a meaning for us, okay?
Yeah.
You know, I do like those Hallmark ornaments. They're really very, very lovely, but after a while you start realizing, what does this have to do with Christmas? And so we sort of pulled back on that. And it was very frustrating to literally not being given the choice of a Christmas ornament that was a Christmas ornament without somebody's advertising plastered all over.
Yeah. And the issue of propagandizing American families about toys is very clear. Buy the toy, use the product, and you will be happy, as though acquisition and conspicuous consumption is the drug that will get you there. But the problem with this drug, Michael, is it always wears off, leaving you and the kids hungry for another fix.
And let's be honest, this is hardly new, and in the early days of computer animation, I spent a lot of time with the ad industry because in the early days of computer animation, only TV commercials had the kind of money it took to pay for it. The dollar per second of runtime of CGI was very expensive. Most people don't realize a lot of money is spent on those commercials. In fact, the budget for a commercial can often be larger than the budget for the entire 30-minute situation comedy around it, because it's that commercial that is the whole point of network TV. And the whole mindset is that you will not value your fellow human being or yourself for your intelligence, your compassion, your education, or your altruism. You will value your fellow human being and yourself, that you're wearing this year's colors, that you've got this year's clever little gadget, that you're pouring this year's scent all over your body, that you've got the current hairstyle.
Yep.
And this is deliberately brainwashed not just into children, but into everybody, because that generates more money for the fashion and cosmetics industries.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing people, in fact, even dating a woman who literally could not walk out the door without spending half an hour putting all this paint and everything all over her face. And to me, this is exactly the same message as you have in the Middle East, where they wear a veil, that your naked, unadorned face is something shameful not to be shown in public. But of course, here in the enlightened West, if you're doing it with cosmetics that wash off and get thrown down the sink at the end of the day, it generates more profit.
Right.
Because a veil can be used day after day after day after day after day. That's why they're primitive. They haven't successfully commoditized that mindset. My personal view is that everybody is beautiful the way the universe made them. And in point of fact, ladies, I got to share something with you. The more of the paint that you put on your face, the more it will emphasize the wrinkles and imperfections, because you lose the natural translucency of your skin. Now, because I am married to Claire, and I'm not interested in dating any other women, I'm not going to be after your body, I'm not even after your money, I'm going to tell you, you actually look a lot better without all that paint. Okay? And that's just the way I am, which is why I'll never be in the corporate media, because if I'm not out there saying, you're not what you should be, but you can be if you pour this bottle all over your body.
Right, right. And also, if you're looking for maybe alternatives to these products that are made under almost slave labor conditions, if you Google American handmade dolls, you'll be very surprised about what you find. And I think parents need to educate children, especially at Christmas time, about the idea that it's about giving more than it is taking. Share with them good habits, like taking them with when you donate to a local food bank or another charity with which you have a very strong resonance. Because kids who learn to care about others early and how important it is grow up to be adults who understand how to care about each other and act accordingly.
Okay, well, you lead to a very important point we need to make.
Yeah.
If Donald Trump, pardon me, is going to bring the manufacturing back to America, we as American citizens have to buy those manufacturers' products.
I agree.
And so we're going to need to really get into this Buy American mindset and stop rewarding these importers for using virtual slave labor in other countries to make this season's fashion whiz-bang gizmo that you're going to use for 2 years, throw away because now you've got to upgrade to the next high-tech whiz-bang fashion gizmo, which is already a failing business model in this economy. But the globalists all want manufacturing here and agricultural there, so we're all dependent on the rest of the world, and that keeps us locked into the globalist system. And one of the good things that happened out of that oil price war with Russia is it forced Russia to start redeveloping its own internal resources and manufacturing and agriculture. And I think that's a good way to go. We need to bring it back here to the United States, but a critical part of that is going to be you, the American people, willing to buy those American products and support these American companies and American workers. And basically tell the big box stores, I don't want to buy anything that's made in another country, if there is an American version available. And you may be asked to pay a few more dollars for it, but if you think about how much good you're going to do for our economy and our workers and reviving America's manufacturing and independence, it's worth the price.
Yeah, and I don't think that self-sufficiency is a dirty word geopolitically. It shouldn't be.
It is to George Soros.
You know, Russia is doing everything it can to be as self-sufficient as it can. It's growing non-GMO food, which people are buying in droves. I remember not too long ago, there was a Bizarre Foods with Andrew Zimmern where he was in St. Petersburg. And you looked at the produce, and he was sniffing the produce, and you looked at it, and it just looked right. It looked good. It looked tasty. And, you know, I think we need to become self-sufficient in that.
And well, I remember when we were back on the mainland and just how amazing the produce section at the supermarkets looked. Here in Hawaii, everything that comes into the major supermarkets is brought in from other countries in the mainland. They all have frequent flyer miles.
Yes.
You know, the broccoli has 2,000 frequent flyer miles. There is produce grown here, but you actually have to go and hunt it down.
Yeah.
Like at the local farmers markets. And we need to start doing that. We need to make the effort to support our American workers and our American farmers to bring back that independence and that self-sufficiency. And it's going to take a commitment by all of us. And it's part of what I mean by saying standing shoulder to shoulder with Donald Trump in order to effect this change.
I absolutely agree. There was another article that I found in Blacklisted News that I felt is important to share with our listeners and our readers. And the title is Proper Not Only Smears Journalists, but Adds Fuel to the Next War. And it talks about people who know a little bit about American history, know that U.S. intelligence services are not above targeting their own citizens for disinformation campaigns and perhaps employ a cadre of journalists to spread disinformation. Now, this sort of started with the Cold War under a program known as Operation Mockingbird, with which I know, Mike, you're very familiar.
Yes.
The program was supervised at the time by the publisher of the Washington Post, the late Phil Gramm, and included about 3,000 writers, editors, and publishers. The net was not just large, but pervasive through the mainstream media. According to Carl Bernstein, it included CBS, Time, New York Times, NBC, the AP, United Press International, Reuters, Hearst, Scripps,
Basically,
Howard,
it was all the major media came under CIA control during Operation Mockingbird.
Yeah.
And again, this goes back to how Washington Post managing editor Bob Kaiser spiked the
Iran-Contra.
Roger Moore's and Sally Denton's story on how, you know, the Bush and Clinton presidencies had engaged in drug smuggling as part of covert operations in Central America.
Yeah. And one of the things this reminds me of is if you want to find out which countries the deep state and the U.S. government aches to invade next, take a look at who the prostitutes and correspondents are demonizing. And chances are it's those countries on their war agenda to-do list. right now, if I were a betting woman, I would bet Russia, China, and Iran are very high up on that list. And Russia and China are in the crosshairs because of their economic growth, making them a threat to the dollar and their evolving weaponry. Iran is in the crosshairs because the U.S. wants to control the oil and the currency in which that oil is sold, and because Israel wants it destroyed, but primarily using American military as a proxy force to do the dirty work. And I think if people look at who is getting demonized, that's a pretty good indication of who the deep state wants to go after next.
Yeah, it is. All of our wars are telegraphed by the corporate media.
Mm-hmm, yep.
Saddam has nuclear weapons. Assad is using sarin gas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and again, nothing new there. Even though Germany literally took out ads in the New York newspapers warning New Yorkers not to take passage on the Lusitania because it was carrying weapons to Great Britain, which made it a legitimate target of war. Those same newspapers who took the money to run those ads were out there blaring, oh, the Lusitania didn't have any weapons. Germany just killed these innocent passengers. We must go to war. And then, of course, eventually divers got into the cargo holds of the Lusitania. What did they find? Weapons.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah. So the U.S. government is certainly not above feeding fake news to the lamestream.
I don't think there's anything that this government doesn't feel they have a right to do if there's a need.
Yeah.
The question isn't what is the government willing to do. The question is really what is this government not willing to do.
I hear you.
Absolutely.
I hear you, yeah.
And which is why I'm very concerned about whether it's in the Black Sea or the Mediterranean, the U.S. sinking one of its own or NATO ships in order to frame Russia.
That is not beyond the realm of possibility.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. I'd like to go to an article talking about an ISIS leader getting terminated in Russia. And what they did this with was interesting. It was a killer robot.
Yeah, John in Barbados was telling us about that.
Yeah. And it was sent to take out an ISIS emir and 4 other militants in a raid this week designed to stop terrorist attacks in the Republic of Dagestan in Russia. And there's a video showing the killer robot indicating that the mechanical shooter was maneuvered into position and received supporting fire from a special forces unit. Now, this has gone on also in the United States. I think you'll remember back a ways where there was a use of an armed robot in July of this year in Dallas to gun down an armed suspect tied to 5 fatal police shootings. But I think in both cases it offers up a question that maybe needs to be answered. And that question is, it appears that this is being used in a domestic environment for extrajudicial assassinations rather than used against a foreign foe. I'd like your feedback on this after the break.
All right, we'll talk about it. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Last segment of our Pauhana Friday program. And Claire, you said you had something you need to follow up on.
I wanted your feedback on the fact that both U.S. and Russia.
Everybody talks about robot warriors, and of course James Cameron, I'm sure, is out there saying, "I told you so, I told you so." The Terminator movies.
Yeah.
But you're right. The what happened on the border with Russia basically amounts to war. These terrorists were trying to sneak in and do bad things. The use of a robot to kill somebody suspected of a crime, and as I recall, it wasn't all that clear how much of a threat this guy represented. But we are racing, unfortunately, toward this world filled with lethal robots that are basically subject to the same kind of software errors that we see in Windows 10.
Yeah.
And we really ought to be concerned. It's one thing when a software error crashes the document you're working on, and quite another when a software error guns your kid down in cold blood.
Yeah.
And I think we ought to be sensitive to that. Before we go back to Claire here, breaking story that I need to mention. Apparently Rudy Giuliani has come on out and said that he is no longer under consideration for Secretary of State. He will not serve in Trump's White House. Basically, for all effects and purposes, Trump said, "You're fired."
Yeah.
Got a short story for us?
Yes, I do. Apparently, it looks like the president of South Korea is going to be...
He's being impeached.
Is being impeached.
The process is underway, and we need more of that here.
And apparently, at the votes of at least 200 members of the 300-seat chamber were needed for the motion. And I am hoping that China is very gently talking to North Korea that this would be a double ungood time to uncork on South Korea militarily.
I don't think North Korea is going to do anything.
I mean,
North Korea is responding to constant provocations, but remember the Chosin, when they claimed that North Korea had torpedoed a South Korean boat, and they dragged up the torpedo and said, see,
and it wasn't the right torpedo.
And it wasn't the right torpedo.
Yeah.
And, the goal of the U.S. foreign policy is to start wars, but to make it look like it was the other side's idea. Pearl Harbor, which we just commemorated here a couple of days ago, is an excellent example.
Yeah.
Roosevelt spent all of 1941 provoking Japan, and then withheld the knowledge of the approaching strike fleet from General Short and Admiral Kimmel, so it made it look like it was a Japanese surprise attack when it was anything but. Everybody knew it was coming. Winston Churchill knew it was coming. And that's what they're trying to do. They want to make it look like Russia attacks first, or North Korea attacks first, or China attacks first.
Or Iran attacks first.
Or Iran attacks first.
Yes.
And that's just the way they operate. Anyway, we're coming up here on the end of the program and the weekend, and again, to all of you living in the more northerly parts of the United States of America, or for that matter, the Northern Hemisphere, don't take any chances with this really intense cold that's coming on down. Hypothermia and frostbite can be very, very serious, and
stay home and bundle up.
Even if you think you're used to the cold that you get where you live, you may not be used to what's coming on down.
Yeah.
So there's the music. We're going to get on out of here. Claire and I have got a lot of stuff to do over the next couple of days here. I don't even want to tell you about it. Remember, you are all part of the independent media. Take what you learn here, share it with everybody that you know. We are literally in a war with the corporate-owned propagandists. We will win, but it's going to be a long fight. We'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.